understand how could this happen? How could this happen? As a matter of fact, go with me. This is my personal study today. I've been stuck here. Go with me to 1 Samuel. And I didn't even intend to take you here, but let me show you something. 1 Samuel. Let me show you how this works. First Samuel chapter 8. Let me show you how this works. Lord, bless us tonight in your word. 1 Samuel chapter 8, it says, and it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judge over Israel. Samuel was a true prophet of the Lord. Samuel was a true prophet, a wise prophet, a very accurate prophet, a prophet that Israel had depended on. And everything Samuel told the people of Israel, it came to pass. And so here it is, Samuel is now about to die. And it came to pass that when he was old, at this point, he was probably about 60 years old. And as godly as Samuel was, the text will reveal to us that Samuel wasn't perfect. And here is a part of his spiritual imperfection. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the secondborn was Abiah. And they were judges, his sons were judges in Beersheba. But look at verse 3. Read it together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lucre is translated as being money. The prophet had raised sons that had not walked in his own father's ways, but turned aside his sons, who were they just sons? What else were they? But what else were they? Judges. Judges that were perverted, took bribes, greedy, opportunists, dishonest, deceitful. And to give you some context, Samuel knew that his sons were not godly. They still ended up as being judges. And it will let you know that sometimes, even as spiritual as we can be, we would much rather keep it in the family than to keep it godly. And this still is happening to this day. You got sons and daughters that are pastoring because their parents were. And that should never be if it's not God's will. Samuel himself was a true man of God. But unfortunately, and to the few parents in the room, now I'm getting ready to offend you, get ready. When your child is not perfect, you need to be willing to acknowledge that. And I don't mean acknowledge that from a defensive standpoint. Nobody's child is perfect. No, we're talking about your child. We must be willing to sit with the fact that sometimes our children end up opposite of what we raised them to be. And when you can't admit that, then life is going to show you. So the elders of Israel, and you know how this works, everybody knows it but us, the parents. We don't want to know. We don't want to see what we can see. The elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel and told him, verse 5, you're old and your sons walk not in your ways. Make us a judge. Make us a king to judge us like all the nations. Israel said, make us a king to judge us like all the nation. I'm going somewhere. The king, but the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. And so Samuel prayed. And the Lord said to him in verse 7, listen, Lord said to Samuel, hearken your voice to the people in all that they say unto you. God told Samuel, listen to the people. For they have rejected you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me. That I should not reign over them. Samuel, as personal as this sounds, they reject me. When they rebel against you, they are really rebelling against me. And so a rebellious people are now telling God's true prophet, using his weakness as justification, give us a king. And what I want you to realize, Ezekiel, is that not because it's God's will, but because all the nations around us have one, and we want one too. But you got to understand why this is so personal to God. Even though it's Samuel's plight, God steals Samuel's disgust and tells them, this is about me. Why? Let me give you some biblical history. All the other nations weren't God's chosen people. God chose Israel. All the other nations around Israel were working against Israel. All the other nations around Israel were going to war against Israel. All the other nations around Israel was stealing Israel's land, destroying Israel's sacred spaces, taking Israel's good. And we know, because what we've been preaching about, what Minister Richards continued on Sunday, God had a promise to Israel. But instead of focusing on God's promise for Israel, Israel said, we want to be like everybody else. Everybody else got a king. We want a king. They didn't need a king. They had the King of Kings. But that wasn't good enough. 1 Samuel 8:8. According to all thy works which they have done since the day, this is God talking to Samuel. According to all the works that they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, until this day, they have forsaken me and served other gods. So do they also unto you. They reject God, they reject God's man. Now, therefore, listen to them, Samuel. Let them have their way. And show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. You can have your king, but let me show you what your king is going to do. So a true prophet says, warnings. Warnings come before destruction. Verse 11, he said, this will be the manner of the king who shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariot, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. He will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground, which means to plant his own crops. And he will reap his harvest, and he will make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots, and he'll take your daughters, and they'll be confectionaries, which means they'll make like ointments and oils and candles. And he'll make them cooks and to be bakers. And he'll take your crops and your vineyards and your olive yards and the best fields that you have. And he'll take the harvest and give it to his people. And he'll then take a tenth of your seed. He'll cause you to pay taxes. Under God, you don't have no taxes. Okay. And he'll give it to his officers and make them rich. And then he'll take your men servants and your maid servants and your best young men and your best cattle and put them to his work. And we're still going, right? And he'll take a tenth of your sheep, and you shall be his servants, and you'll cry out in that day because of your king, which you shall have chosen for you. And the Lord won't hear you because you don't want God. You want a king. So they changed their mind. They didn't? What does it say? Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. And they said, no, we still want our king. Verse 20, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go before us and fight battles. Samuel heard all the words of the people. When it says he rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord, you know what that means? He prayed. And the Lord said to Samuel, look at verse 22 again, hearken unto their voice. Make them a king. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, go ye every man to his city. Why am I here? I'm here to show you how you can have your evil way against God's will. I'm here to show you how somebody who is bent on hurting other people can do it and God still be God. I'm here to show you that even when it concerns God's will, and God's will is clear, that God does one thing that he doesn't do this for us, we do this for ourselves. We have the right to our own choice. It doesn't matter how good I preach tonight, and it doesn't matter how much your mother or your father prays over you. When you want to do bad, it doesn't matter how the fast. You finished fasting, and you made up your mind. I'm still going to do what I want to do. And people keep poking fun at our religion, saying that's the kind of God you serve that would let that happen to children. What about what you let happen to yourself? God did not will for us to go through some of the things that we're going through. They wanted to have their way. If it was God's will for them to have a king, it would not be this kind of a king. And what you will eventually learn, and what you already know but you don't realize it yet, is that it was eventually God's will for them to have a king. Guess who it was? David. And guess what kind of king David was? He was a man after God's own heart. Oh, come on, somebody. So even when it is God's will, if it ain't right, it ain't time. When it's time for you to have a king, Israel, I promise you, you will not have a king that will rape you. You will not have a king that will rob from you. You will not have a king that will put you in poverty. I will send you a king that will bring you and lead you into prosperity. Can you believe Israel said no? We want it now. And it's even harder to fathom that God told Samuel, give them what they want. Are you ready? What if God was meeting with your Samuel and saying, okay, just give him what he wants? Just give her what she wants. If that's what she wants so bad, and you have counseled, and you have prayed, and then you warn. And if you're like me, you are sicker than the person who's getting to be sick. And it ain't because of what's going on in your body, it's because of what's going on in their mind. And you care so much and you love people so much that you don't want to see them go down the wrong road, so you beg them. And God is saying, let them have it. Let them have it. What if that was kind of like God's attitude as to why these killings keep happening? Since they don't want to bring prayer back. And they want to have their way. It's supposed to be one nation under God. What's godly about our nation? Oh, y'all. What if that's the reason why these kids keep dropping? Why gangbangers can be known murderers and known traffickers and known drug dealers and still shoot to the top of the charts and still be, at the core of why people are dropping dead all around them in the industry. You're ordering people's deaths. You have no reason to be a gangbanger. Now it's just your pleasure. You made it out the trap. You made it out the hood. You've made millions of dollars, and now you can prosper in your success. But you still want to run the streets. You want to make music that will tell our nephews to be gangbangers too. Glorifying the past that you said you only sing about. And so, why does this stuff keep happening? You want to know why? Because we want to have our way. And Israel got their Saul. Israel got their Saul. And God didn't even like try to make it out to be a doomsday. God even used Samuel to identify Saul and anoint Saul. And then God said Saul is going to start prophesying. So even when they got their ungodly king, God tried to convert him. Huh? How many in here, God's still trying to convert you? But you still hell-bent. and you think because it's coming to you that it's God's will. It's not. It's not. You'll always know God's will because it'll line up with morals. Not your feelings. Israel was caught in their feelings. We want a king like everybody else. We want a king like everybody else. You'll know God's will because God's will won't line up with popular society. Amen. Have you figured out the closer you get to God's will, the more unpopular you are? You can be the best teacher and still be unpopular. You can be the best student and still be unpopular. You can be famous and unpopular. Look now, I promise you. And so I wanted to just show you this. It doesn't have anything to do with gun violence, but it has everything to do with how we want what we want. And when you want it so bad, God will take his hands off of you. Say that again, Tayshawn. Some of you all in here remember what it's like to live uncovered. And you think because you're getting everything that you want that God is giving it to you. God is allowing it. The blessings of the Lord make you rich and add no sorrow. Check your desires. And so we have people that are desiring to do bad things. And we have a nation that has made it easy for it to happen. And here we are. I don't have any natural born children, and so I'm just lost. I don't know what it's like. I know that those kids had just finished a graduation ceremony. That some of the parents had attended the graduation ceremony and took the last pictures of their child alive. And there's one parent who feels like it's her fault because the child wanted to leave like we all did. Can you take me out of school? Can you take me out of school? After the graduation ceremony, and the parent insisted that the child stay in school, and the parent left. Y'all, that's crazy. And another parent was a deputy. He responded to the shooting. Didn't even know that his own child would be amongst the dead. We can't make the rest of America turn back to God. We can just make sure that we turn back to God. I told the folks tonight, if you have a child, a son or a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a friend, a homie, a compadre, a sister, a cousin that's going down the wrong path, work like hell to pull them out. Because if you don't, the devil's going to pull them in. Work like hell. Send them messages. Keep getting rejected. Just keep talking the truth. Keep talking the truth. Because, y'all, we are living in the last and evil day. We are living in that day where men are lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. And you all need to make sure that what you support and what you co-sign outside of church looks like church. It's the best way I could say it. In other words, don't get out of here and know that people are living loosely and think that it's funny. Even if it is funny, hold your humor and say, wait a minute, nah, that's actually not cool. You're low-key addicted now. You know, that's not cool. You're low-key, you know, dibbling and dabbling in darkness now. It's time for us to be witnesses. It's time for us to be witnesses. It's time for us to diffuse and not instigate. It's time for us to be ashamed of all this darkness in our family. It's time for us to be ashamed of all this darkness amongst our friends.
What if you keep falling?
What if what now?
What if you keep falling and getting back up?
You as an individual keep falling.
Like you keep falling and you get back up. Still know what it is.
Well, young man says, what if you keep falling? But you kind of answered your own question when you said, and get back up. The problem is if you don't get up. Is if you fall and you say, I'm tired of falling, so I'm going to stay down. I'm tired of falling, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing when I fall. You got to understand, it's easy to fall in a society like this. It's traps and trips everywhere you go. The hardest thing to do is to stay up. The hardest thing to do is to keep your focus. The hardest thing to do is to say, you know what, I need to stop watching that. The hardest thing to do is to say, you know what, that's just one Netflix series that's not for me. That's just one album that's not for me. You know what I'm saying? That's one relationship. It feel good, but it ain't good. You know, it's kind of like when you realize that if you want to eat healthy, you're going to have to deny yourself of some things that you love. But if you keep on eating fried chicken every day, you're going to dig your own grave with a knife and fork. And even though it tastes good, it ain't good. And so to keep falling is to say, well, you know what? I got high blood pressure. You know, I might as well enjoy it. You know what I'm saying? I'm fat. I might as well just enjoy it. So when you got to learn how to deny yourself. Huh? And deny yourself isn't always about sex and ice cream. Sometimes you got to deny depression. Sometimes you got to deny offense. I know she said it, but you know what? She don't mean me no harm. Ain't no need to be going home and being mad at somebody because they said something that I don't like. Deny your offense. Deny your darkness. I know you don't feel good, but open the blinds anyway. Get up anyway and say, you know what? I'm not going to throw another pity party today. That's the real type of self-denial that you need to be working on. You know, what if you keep falling? You got to deny yourself that trip. Y'all ain't saying nothing to me. You headed right to hell and you know it. We have to take warnings to heart. When you don't want to take a warning to heart, then you are inviting the enemy into your mind. Everybody gets something in your mind that you should not have done. Oh, well, just one thing. Get a serious thing. Serious thing. You got it there? Don't do this to appease the lesson. Just tell the truth. Was there ever a warning? There was? You mean to tell me that before you fell, the Lord tried to help you stay standing? What's harder to do is to get something that you blame on other people. Before you became a legitimate victim, did God try to keep you in the clear? God will tell you when evil is present. When you cannot deny yourself, what is the purpose of God talking if I'm not going to listen anyway? God is no different from us in this regard. Why will I keep wasting my voice? Isn't that what God said to Samuel? They keep denying me. Let them have their way. Whew. Somebody ought to say with a sincere heart tonight, help me to understand why your way is right. If you don't want to pray that prayer sincerely tonight, you can have your way. And God is not going to stop you. You can obtain what you want to obtain. I told you all a few weeks ago, God is not getting ready to unprosper people. If that was the case, then we would not have any wealthy, corrupt businessmen. And we would not have any drug dealer moguls. You do not need God to help you to get rich. You can get rich on your own. The problem is, what is it that you're going to get out of it? If you don't do it the right way, if you don't do it God's way, it's important for us to understand sometimes we don't see how God's plan will bring us into the success and the happiness and the peace and the joy that we want, because we got to go through. Ain't nothing about God that you can just think it and achieve it. Everything about God is a process. Everything that God created, he created in process. Huh? Everything. You know, if you want to grow a flower, it'll grow. But you got to seed it first. Got to water it. I don't see nothing. So, huh? If you want to plant what is it, an apple tree? How many years? You ain't going to see no apples. You're going to see leaves and branches. Process. What about God? Does not include a process. Israel had a promise, but what they didn't agree with was the process. Keep on being stubborn when it comes to the process. My Lord, help me, Holy Spirit. Keep on being stubborn. It's unfortunate. Families all over our country are grieving once again because of something that we don't want to do anything about. Best at this point you can do is do something about yourself. If you are mentally unstable, I know God can help you. I know it because God helped me. Every time a demon tries to come and take over your mind, if you know people, you're chatting with people, you're friends with people, you're watching statuses with people that are mentally unstable. What's crazy about all these shootings is that, but stop being so insecure that you gotta look like a fool to other people to feel like you're loved, accepted. All of us in here are outcasts. And you know, like all of us in here, like everybody has something about them that people just don't like. Be okay with it, because you don't like everybody. But I keep telling people, if you want to be crazy, you'll be crazy. You know, if you don't know how to let go of somebody who said, I just don't love you no more. So you want to start acting crazy to get somebody to love you back, you're going to lose your act. And next thing you know, you keep trying to be crazy, then you're going to... Anxiety is weird how it's real in 2022, but in 2002 we could cope. What happened? What's happening? You wouldn't know why a lot of people have anxiety right now, because everybody don't have followers. We're in a society to where if I don't feel accepted, I don't feel like me. We have glorified all of these images of popularity. We have glorified what it means to be influencers. It's crazy. We got all these influencers, but more mess, more crimes, more murders, more suicides, more hell. But we got more influencers than ever. What are they influencing? What are they influencing? And so if you're insecure, it's time to face it. Let's face it. Let's face it. What are you insecure about? Let's face it. Get it out there. It's enough people that's navigated that path to be able to help you and still love you despite your insecurities. But if you keep telling God, I want what I want, and then you question why God let it happen. I'm going to close this by saying I'm so glad that the stuff that I thought I needed, some stuff God did not provide. And I realize now, Father knows best. I'm glad it's some doors God closed. I'm glad it's some things that God said no to. And it's crazy because it wasn't my will, but I had enough fear in me. That's right. The stupid series, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. When you're no longer afraid of being out of God's will. Oh no, you don't know what you say. Oh, okay, all right. You know, when you're no longer afraid, you may not understand. We never understand. We don't see it oftentimes until you see. The difference is you got to get to a place where you will trust God when you don't understand. And some of you all, you're not there. If it ain't clear to you, you don't trust it. And that's a shame. Because what you're saying is, God, you got to explain yourself to me. And God is saying, but the last time I did it, you still did what you wanted to do. The last time I showed you and you still say, I don't, you did what Israel did. Everybody say this with me. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. You should never be so common with God to where God can't get you together.